So I'm delighted to have with us today Dana DeBeauvoir. I don't know how many of you heard her on the radio just 2 days ago, basically talking about this exact topic, is what is in store for 2019 and 2018 for that matter, in terms of election security, 2019 in terms of what kind of machines are we going to have, and how secure are they, and also a little bit about how we can be more comfortable knowing that the election is a secret ballot. So, Dana, please.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Hello. Well, and you're right. When you heard me on the radio just a couple of days ago, we have good news. A piece of work just got released, and I'll share it with you. Really proud of it. This is the book. It's going to be available here pretty soon. This is the advanced copy. It was published by a group of people that I'm most honored to be with. It's a group of academics and computer security people and psychologists and sociologists and CIA generals and, oh my gosh, just really a who's who of people who have broad experience in the sort of newly defined area of election security. And what we've done is we were charged with going in and looking at, given what happened in the 2016 election with the Russian interference, not with the voting, but with the other programs that they did. What are we supposed to do for the future to safeguard the outcome of the election? Because they most definitely did influence the outcome without ever getting into any of the databases. So what are we going to do with that for the future? So what we did was we looked at all of the factors. We spent about 8 months studying and listening to some very sobering CIA reports about just how widespread this is and will continue to be, and put together 41 recommendations for things that we all need to do starting today. The audience for this is mostly Congress and states, in the sense of the secretaries of state and the other things that legislatures and people who are working with statewide election systems need to put in place to safeguard the systems that we now have and what to watch for the future, now that we know what's going on. So I'll be issuing a news release. I think I'm going to be able to do it on Monday, which will tell everybody how to read it online, how to go get the information. So I'm tickled we did it. The number one, though, you'll be happy to know, the number one conclusion that we all came up with, just without any equivocation, is that all of our voting systems for the future, no matter what kind of voting system you have, needs to have a paper trail.
Yes.
So, which brings me to the first question I think y'all wanted me to talk about was, what are we going to do about our new voting system that Travis County Commissioners Court just allowed me to sign the contract for and move forward on unanimous vote. Just about 3 weeks ago, I think they signed it. It may have only been 2 weeks ago. So this is all very fresh news, and the system is manufactured by the largest voting company in the United States. It's called Election Systems and Software. We are probably the first, but there's probably going to be 2 or 3 just right in a row that are going to have this election system and software voting system, and it is an electronic voting system that kind of looks like the one we have now, except for the part that helps the voter make their choices doesn't have any memory in it. And the main feature of it is that, which helps for a lot of different reasons to have the electronic portion of it, and has a paper backup trail, a paper trail that the voter then takes, it prints out from the machine, the voter then takes, looks at, voter verifies themselves, and then the ballot card goes over to a ballot box that'll be in the polling place, puts it in the ballot box, and here's what I thought was really pretty cool about this particular system. And I've been highly critical of the ones that have been on the marketplace, but this one I thought had it right. You go over, you put your ballot in the ballot box, and from the paper record, from the original paper record, remember there's no memory in the machine you were just on, from the paper record, the ballot box makes an electronic copy of your ballot. The paper goes in the ballot box, it gets saved, and for election night we still get to use the fast and accurate tally so we can get quick election results on election night, but we have that physical artifact that we can hang on to and use for election night or post-election audits, and I want to talk a little bit about what those are, as well as if somebody wants to actually use it for a recount. The idea behind a paper trail with these new voting systems is that we don't have to go all the way to a full recount, which is expensive and which requires the authority to commence. Elections administrators don't have the authority to conduct a recount on their own. It has to be asked for by somebody with standing. So what you want to do is you want to be able to go in, though, and look at a variety of cuts and slices of the data so that you can see, okay, have we counted every ballot? Did we miss anybody? Did we count anything twice? Were there any sort of abnormalities, too many undervotes? Did people skip something? Anything that looks unusual. You want to be able to go in and do audits like that. And we're a little handicapped right now in being able to do the kind of in-depth auditing that I would prefer, although we do quite a bit here in Travis, because we don't have a physical artifact, and because I'm limited in what I can do in terms of touching ballots once they're all closed back up after election night and we're finished with the canvass. So I really like the idea, though, of the electronic copy originates from the paper. We all start with the paper, and that's where we go from here. Now, one of the things that was a source of confusion among the group I was working with for this last 8 or so months was this concept of paper ballot. So this gives us a chance to talk about why we need electronic voting and why it is a good thing. Because there's been some talk about just throwing out all of the electronic voting and not having any of it, and we just have, just hand-marked manual paper ballots. And there's even some folks who go so far as to say we should hand tally. That's really getting out there, but here's why. Here's why we want to have electronic voting. If we did not have a way to produce the correct ballot style for every voter who showed up at our vote centers or our early voting locations, then we would have to discontinue those voter outreach programs, those convenience programs that voters love so much. We would not be able to guess and either pre-print or use some other techniques, which are also expensive and difficult, to guess where a voter might show up at any one of the usually between 23 and maybe even up to 30 early voting locations, and then somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 or 160 vote centers on election day. You would be pre-printing your brains out, and you couldn't afford it. And there's a security risk of that much inventory of paper. How do you keep it straight? Because every single piece of paper has to be accounted for, just like a dollar bill at a bank. So if you're dealing with that much paper in a jurisdiction our size, and with these programs that allow voters to go anywhere, we very much need electronic voting so that you can have an electronic inventory to pull your ballot from. You don't have to second guess where you think people are going to show up. The other reason why it's really important that we keep the good things about electronic voting is that it's required by federal law. We have to have systems that allow our voters with disabilities, and that's physical, mobility, eyesight, vision, hearing, a variety of either temporary or permanent or growing disabilities in a population that is greatly increasing in the United States, we have to give them assistance so that they have the right, just like everybody else, to cast a ballot that's private to them, that's a secret ballot, and that they can do independently all on their own. You know, gone are the days when it was okay to just say, oh, we'll have somebody come up and read the ballot and mark it for them. That's not fair, it's not right, it's against federal law. The only way that we can offer folks with disabilities the chance to cast an independent and secret ballot is electronic voting. So we get best of both worlds, because you get when you're hand marking a ballot, the best word I've heard to describe hand marking is esgrafiados. You can really, you know, mark up a ballot and make mistakes in it, and it becomes then very difficult to interpret the intent of the voter. So what we really would prefer is to have unambiguous marks, every ballot nice and clean and clear, no questions, and give the voters the chance that if they do see a mistake, instead of trying to mark it out and circle it and draw an arrow and write a note, that what they do is they just say, no, I can correct it on the screen before I print the ballot and get it just the way I want it. Or you could just say, okay, I give up, I messed up this ballot, give me a fresh one, and everyone in Texas is entitled to 3 chances to have a clean, you know, ballot that's clear what the intent of the voter is. So for all those reasons, you know, fast, accurate, and accessibility issues, there's good reasons why we need best of both worlds, both electronic voting and finally a paper trail. It was a hard fight to get this. I mean, y'all have been incredibly patient, and you have been demanding this paper trail for years. And I have been, you know, fighting and arguing with these vendors for 15 years, trying to get this done, and I was so frustrated with the stubbornness of the marketplace in refusing to do a paper trail that I finally just gave up and said, fine, we're going to develop our own. We're going to design our own system. And many of you know and followed through the years the development of StarVote. I ultimately had to just give up on StarVote, and it broke my heart. But I couldn't find anybody out there who was willing to build it for us. And as our time grew shorter and shorter with our own system, you know, aging, so I needed to, you know, take action and get this problem solved, it became clear that the risks were increasing and the price was, you know, maybe increasing, and I couldn't find competent builders, and what were we going to do? And so finally I had to just give up on StarVote and go back to the traditional marketplace and just hammer on those vendors some more to force them to give us a paper trail. What happened in that intervening 15 years when we were doing StarVote and we couldn't get them to move forward in the general marketplace, was that StarVote began to influence the marketplace. It began to have an effect on what the standard was for what we should expect for the future. And the standard being, you know, voters have the right to declare their own intent, not have somebody figure it out for them later on at the counting station. Voters have the right to have a ballot that they are absolutely sure is going to get counted the way they cast it. And the only way you know that is to be able to do an audit, at least at some statistical level, that compares what you're counting with what was cast. And you can't do that unless you have some way of conducting a post-election audit. The way that we have now with our current system is flawed. You can do it, but a lot of people don't trust it, don't like it, don't think it's good enough. So we need, you know, a way that's better. Well, so the really good news about fighting and arguing and, you know, just being dogged about hounding these election vendors is that by the time we ended up with certification for a voting system in Texas that finally had a paper trail, it happened April 2017. April 2017, we finally had something that we were, you know, that was legal to purchase in the state of Texas, and it looks a lot like StarVote. I was pleasantly surprised when I finally started seeing it, because I'd seen the other states as they were beginning to look at this. Texas was among the first to get this in. So last year, what it had, just like StarVote had, it had a way for you to make, pull up your ballot for your neighborhood without running the risk of running out of ballots in a particular area. It allowed you to mark and change your mind and go back and forth all you wanted. And then finally print out a ballot that is voter verified. You look at those choices and you make the determination that yes, in fact, this is the way I choose to vote. And then that paper record is kept. In federal elections, and I kind of adopt the policy that the records retention period for federal should apply to all the other elections too. So we keep those records for 22 months. So plenty of time after to resolve any, arguments or further audits or lawsuits or, anything anybody wants to look at. There were a couple of other things that were really great about StarVote that we're gonna get from this off-the-market voting system. And one of them is a thing called risk limiting audits. I mentioned that the first thing we got was a paper trail. The second thing that this system gives us and that this report calls for is that within the next 10 years, every single election in the United States should have what's called risk limiting audits, RLAs. What a risk limiting audit is it says after every single election, you're going to go in and it's a statistical count. So let's say you have a race you want to double check, and you've got a big margin between the two candidates, one big, and so there's not a lot of doubt about what happened. But you want to go in and check those ballots. Well, you only really need to check a smaller sample of the total for that race in order to confirm that yes, the electronic copy that was used for tabulation and the paper copy that voters verified in fact match, and so your proof of the election, or I should say the election is proved up. You have a physical proof. All right. Now let's give a little different circumstance though. Let's say you've got a really close race and it was hard fought and there's lots of high emotion between the candidates. So what you want to do with that kind of a race is go in and pull a whole bunch more ballots. You need a higher, to get that 95% confidence level, for those of you who remember your statistics classes, you want to have a bunch more ballots, and you want them pulled randomly. You don't want to have any kind of sequencing or serial number or anything like that. Just pull them at random and then go back and compare the paper to the electronic. The closer the margin of win or whatever, the more ballots you have until you really get to the point where it's 100% and you're doing a recount. But for the most part, you're going to have elections that are going to be within a margin that's not going to require 100% pull. You're going to have something less than that. So for government, it is a cost-effective way to go in and say, we're going to double check after each election, but we don't have to spend, extraordinary amounts of time and money verifying down to the actual, every single ballot, that needs to be included. And that's going to be good news for making sure that we actually perform these audits, and that we don't have to rely on a recount to confirm and to prove up every single election. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here that have been sent to me, and they just follow right along nicely with this. So let me kind of go forward with, as we're talking about what this new voting system is going to look like. It's called ExpressVote. We'll all get used to the new name. ExpressVote with a paper trail. And the timing for it is, there are two windows of opportunity for us to get it in place before the presidential election. And it's a tight time frame. Like I said, I maybe spent a little too much time on StarVote, but I only just had this available April 2017, so we don't have a lot of time here, but it really needs to be in place in time for 2020 presidential. Now, so I'm looking at two windows of opportunity. The earliest and the first one, and the one I really want to try to go for, is November 2019, so basically a year from now. We'll be using it for the first time. It's a constitutional amendment election. And so it's not going to be overly complicated. It'll be a nice, less emotional, less, there won't be a whole bunch of races and everything. It'll be more like a constitutional amendment election where it's yes, no. Those are very easy to manage. The turnout tends to be a little softer. For a lot of reasons, that's where we want to start. So that by the time we get to the presidential, we've all had at least one, if not 2 or 3 opportunities to vote on the new system before we get hit with the 4-year swell of everybody turning out to vote. So the time frame puts us, if we want to be ready, say about a year from now. Next summer, we will be in full-blown training mode countywide with everybody we can find, all hands on deck, everybody to help. Training our election workers, training our voters, training our trainers, training everybody we can find, just like we did with the system we have today. We'll train everybody how to use the new voting system. But here's the thing. Voters are going to have a new job when they vote now, and it's a serious job. You can't just, do something on your ballot, hit the button, and walk away. You're going to have a new responsibility, and I think y'all are going to take to it just fine, and I think everybody's going to feel like that we've all done something with elections that has made a watershed change in the way that we're making sure that these votes are real and we know what goes into the ballot box. You will be asked to, when you go up to this screen, and it's just a marking device, there's no memory in this touch screen machine. It's there for ADA purposes and for making sure we get clean, clear marks. But you're going to be asked to mark it, and then when you print it out, it's going to come out, and it's going to be kind of a card stock, so it's not flimsy. It's pretty substantial for you to hold. So you're going to be able to hold it up, glasses, magnifying glass, whatever you want, to look at it to make sure these choices, even though you saw them on the screen, that the choices that are now on your paper ballot are really the ones you want. So you've got a job now to do to voter verify your paper record. Y'all have never had that responsibility before. It's always been done for you at the counting station on election night. It's not the best way to do it, but that's what state law requires right now. It's going to be much better for y'all to do this job, but it's going to take some training, and it's going to take some experience on y'all's part to be able to say, okay, I did my job, I did my extra piece of voting. So you know now what the time frame is going to be. You know what the training schedule is going to be. We're all geared towards trying to be ready for the presidential. I'm really sorry that I can't get this up and going fast enough for just, what is it, about 6 weeks now?
Yeah.
5 weeks. We're drawing closely to the election. There isn't any way I can do that responsibly. But we will be able to get it up and running in advance of 2020. Now, I mentioned 2 windows of opportunity. If for some reason can't get things done, I can't get the e-poll books to connect properly with the new voting system, I can't get voter registration new system to connect with it, we're not comfortable that people understand the paper trail part of it enough. Whatever the reasons are, we think we're not quite ready. What we will do is delay after the November constitutional amendment election, pick up the very next election that we can, and still try to achieve a window of opportunity to implement again before 2020. The idea is that's got to be really where we have our major deadline, is getting that accomplished. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is give you a chance. I've given you kind of a briefing of where we are. I'd like to give you a chance to ask questions, and I have one in the back.
Yes, for the verification of the print ballot.
Yes.
Since you've been so nice, and I really truly appreciate the accessibility issues.
Yes.
What is the plan for verification for non-print users, specifically people who are Braille users, emerging language users, or emerging reader users?
Right.
All have a print size issue.
Yes. One of the things I like about the system we have right now is that we all vote on the same piece of equipment, no matter level of ability or disability. It's all the same. And I want to try to keep that for the future. Now, the marketplace has done some things that make it a little difficult to accomplish that. For example, touchscreen. Well, that's not helpful. But here's what we've done. Every one of those screens, every one of those voting booths that you go up to will have a tactile keypad right there with it, and a set of audio earphones, so that you can automatically begin to interact with it from a tactile keypad, so you can change and make your choices. And then you got an audio read in English and Spanish, and we're getting close to what's going to maybe end up being another language, and right now we're not sure which of the Asian languages it's going to be. We're getting close to having a third language here. You want to be able to have it read back. And then one more step is that after this card is printed out, you want to be able to verify that too.
Right.
So it goes into another special reader, and we're working out the details of exactly how that happens too, because I don't want to ask people who are vision impaired to have to try to take this to some other station. So I want them to do it right there at their voting booth. But the idea is you put it into a reader, the paper into a reader, and the scanner on the reader reads it back into your headphones, so that the voter also gets their paper ballot voter verified too, even if they can't see it, or even if the print is too small, although we'll have magnification available as well. So
I have further questions on this that are not appropriate for this group. My husband's an accessibility expert.
Thank you. We need all the help we can get, because it's going to be tricky to work some things out. I don't like touchscreen.
Right. I mean, he was one of the people who years and years and years ago started bringing up the accessibility issue of the voting system 20 years ago. To whom should I send him in your office?
Well, why don't you send him to me, because I'm kind of organizing.
So you'll figure out where it goes.
Yeah, and it's all brand new right now. And I will tell you that one of the other things that our study showed us too is that, and I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, is that there's a trade-off that occurs with security versus accessibility. Oftentimes, the things that you want to do for security, like a voter verified paper trail, interferes with people's accessibility rights. So you have to figure out, okay, well, if we're going to have this extra security piece, then how do we turn that back into something that is accessible? So it's a moving target. I don't think you ever end up with a final answer. It's always about continuous improvement. So we're not going to have a final answer. We're not going to know. And as a matter of fact, after we voted on this a few times, then I think we'll come back and we'll say, okay, are there other things that need to be done? Its job is never finished. Yeah. Okay. So I'll go here and then here. Yes, ma'am.
The description so far, how much time does it take for one voter to go through this?
Mm-hmm.
Will it cause those long lines and then everybody is discouraged?
Right, good question. Maybe. Here we tend to put all of our elections together in November because it's so cost effective for government. It makes a lot of sense to share the expenses of an election. Expensive. And so you end up with a long ballot no matter what. It used to be that when you were having candidate or partisan elections that you had a straight party option that you could use. Well, that's now been taken away. There's no more straight party voting. So that's going to create more of a problem. Every election...
2018 is still straight. You can still do that in 2018.
Yeah, in 18, but by the time we get to 2020, you won't have that. Yeah, right now we'll still have to, but it's going away. It's being taken away from us. Yeah. So the idea is you're going to have to go step by step through every race on the ballot, and that's in terms of good government, that's not a bad thing to make everybody look at everything they should be looking at, and then you can make the decision whether you want to skip it or vote on it or whatever your choice is. But every time we set up an election, we go through a timing test to see how long it takes our voters, sort of the average voter, to vote through. And they can be, it usually is I mean, sometimes you can get a 2-minute ballot. That's happened. Most of the time it takes voters around 6 or 7 minutes to vote a fairly lengthy, sort of what you would call a normal November ballot. But we have gotten up to 11 and 12 minutes per voter to vote a ballot at times. And I anticipate, since we're losing straight party, and since I'm thinking that there's going to be, a lot more attention, please, to this election, we're going to see better turnout, more people are going to vote, that we could see, lines form. So and before I come back to you, this gives me an opportunity to talk to y'all about a sticky problem that I don't have an answer to yet, but we're all going to have to talk about it, and that's this line problem. We don't have a problem with resources. The county spends a lot of money, more than other counties, with putting vote centers and early voting locations out into the community. And I've always told them, I will do as many locations as you are willing to pay for. They have always been generous about this. So we don't have that problem here. What we are having a problem with is use of our resources. We're having this human nature problem where people are tending to show up not in the early part of early voting. We go crying for people those first few days. And they tend to pile on at the end of the early voting period. It's not so bad during early voting because you're not caught in a situation where you can't produce results because people are still voting, right? But election day, it's turning into a real problem. And I will tell you a story. This will be the first time I've actually shared this in public, so y'all will have to tell me how it sounds. Okay, so here's the problem. A couple of years ago, we decided that if we could manage to get the early voting locations, some of them to go along with us, and they're great. Most of them are really willing to host us. And by the way, we are their guests. They don't have to do it by law. This is volunteer, okay? Could we maybe turn, when we went to vote centers, could we maybe turn some of those early voting locations into vote center locations too? They tended to be, popular and everybody knew about them. Well, best plans don't go unpunished. What happened was we created a terrible situation for ourselves. And here's what's happened. And it's the grocery stores that are the big problem. The poor Randalls. I just hope it doesn't get to be a real critical situation. Here's what's happening. Now that everybody's figured out that they can still go to the grocery store on election day as a vote center, what they've done is they'll go home from work and they'll figure out, oh yeah, I forgot to vote. It'll be on the news, or they'll get social media. And so they jump in their car and they run down to the grocery store. And everybody piles into a 3-hour line at 7 p.m. Well, first of all, that's not right. Nobody should have to wait 3 hours to vote. But I don't know what government can do to stop voters doing that to themselves. What are we going to do about this situation? And when they do that, I can't get results out until well after that line is gone. When we shut down early voting or shut down polling places, presumably it's 7 now, you usually don't get your first results until 8:30 or 9 as it is. So if they're voting until 10, that's midnight, before we've even had the first chance at the first box. This is not okay. It's not okay. We have to figure out a solution to it, and I don't know how. It's human nature. It's a misuse of resources because we've got so much money out in the field, and it's going unused in lots and lots of ways. And then we have this behavior on the part of voters that's hurting themselves and hurting the whole process. And as you say, hurts confidence because then everybody says, oh, holy cow, look at this line and it's going to take forever. And where are the results? And who's responsible for this delay? And it's a problem. It's a problem. So anyway, we need to figure out what we're going to do about that for the future. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I've worked as an election judge, and
Thank you. Give her a hand. We probably got a room full over here. Thank you.
What I was going to say is many times I've been in a polling polling place that is empty. And we have called other locations and said, send them over here. And I was wondering if we do report how many are in line. And I was wondering if there was some way that information could be passed on to another location. So they say, go down to so-and-so, you know. And the other alternative might be to have a second polling place, because Randall seems to be the worst, from what I understand. So have a second one, just maybe in the same strip mall or something like that, that they can kind of split it up a little bit.
I think you've been reading my notes. No, we do. We have, well, the first one we have, and we've used it now for, gosh, I bet at least 3 or 4 elections, and it's called Red, Yellow, Green. And it's a new thing that the election judges in the polling places do for not only for early voting but also for vote centers on election day too. And it's a periodic update that we ask them to do about every half an hour, depending on what their circumstances are. And we realize they get busy, but we ask them to please share the information. And it's an update into a system that was shared throughout the whole county with all the polling places and with Central, that says, here's the length of our line. It's 15 minutes. And so if you got a 10 or 15 minute line, that's considered a green light. If you got a half-hour line, that's considered a yellow light. And if you got a line of 45 minutes or an hour or more, you got a red light. So you can tell just when you look at this app on your phone or on your computer, red, yellow, green, where you need to go. So we'll be using that and making sure more and more people know about it. Everybody really seemed to like it. It was when all the grocery stores were just redlined, from noon on, that it was like.
I worked at the Fiesta grocery store, and that was not nearly as bad as the Randall's up north, but still, it was. You look back and.
The line
they're blocking the people trying to buy groceries.
I know. These grocery stores are really patient with us. The other thing is that we have tried to tell people, that you're standing in line here, and 2 blocks this way and 3 blocks this way are locations where there are 0 people in line. Sometimes it works, and sometimes people will just stand there and say, well, I'm happy just looking at my phone and just standing here. And the problem with that is, well, look at the damage that you're doing to the whole process, because you've created this 3-hour line and you're letting these other resources go. So somehow we've got to have everybody now involved in this new problem we've created. So yes, we are trying to get the word out about additional locations that are practically right next door, and then take advantage of the tax dollars we've already spent earlier in the program, so that you don't have to wait in a line. We didn't size it that way. We didn't mean for it to be that way. We spend plenty of money for it to not be that way. We need to figure out how to make better use of it. And let's see,
And I wanted to question while I was at it, is this operation we use in Travis County statewide, or is Travis County the only one using it?
There might be some other counties that have thought up this great idea, but it's Travis County. Okay, so I had back here, I think.
Yes.
And then back to you.
A quick question. Are the vote by mail ballots going to change so that you can scan them in the system the same way?
That'll all look pretty much the way it looks right now.
Will it be able to be scanned into the same system?
Yes, and included with everything else, just like it is now.
Okay.
It comes in a paper.
So it doesn't have to change with the new system?
No, it'll look virtually identical, yes.
I hate to be a devil's advocate, but
Okay.
the problem you have on election day with long lines could be solved by requiring everyone to vote at their precinct.
Well, and every voter's going to be, mad at you for saying that. So I can't help with that one. No, these locations, these vote centers are so popular.
Oh, yeah.
There's, they love it, and I'm not going to argue with them. Yes, ma'am. And
I
we'll
have
come.
2 questions. One is that has there expressed any concern about with security that we have our elections, especially at elementary school centers?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
And the other question, so I would appreciate any comment you had on that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that is there any support coming from the federal government to help states address some of the concerns what we're hearing from you, it all sounds fabulous.
Yeah.
We wish it was more pervasive.
Yes.
I sense around at least the state it is not.
Okay. Let me come back to schools and take the second question first. What's the federal or the state government doing to assist with elections, with making some sort of periodic and normal and standard investments in replacement of voting equipment all along the way so that you don't get into this situation where suddenly you're at the end of your life and you've got to make this, panicked and quick implementation of a new system, all that kind of stuff. The answer is Congress and the state are doing absolutely zero to help. You may have heard that we had a new investment of money, $383 million, I think, $380-something million that was supposed to be sent to the states for the purpose of election security, whatever that term means. It didn't say voting security, it didn't say database security, it didn't say voter registration security, it just said election security. And $383 million is the equivalent of a 10-cent solution to a $25 problem. It's so pathetic that the message is loud and clear. We don't care. We don't see it. We're not going to do anything about it. And that money will not even arrive in time for us to do anything about voter registration databases for the 2018 election. And so I want to just talk real quickly, because the thing that we're worried about most now is the Russians were really clear. They gave up on voting systems. They're too hard to get to. We're too spread out. It's too diverse. It's too, that's not where the gold is. And even with voter registration systems, it's complicated to get to them, but they are connected to the internet. And we do want to make sure that we've got, strengthened VPNs, and that we've got protections, and that we've got assessing equipment, and we know if we have intrusions. We need to have all that in place. People know how to protect those kinds of internet-connected systems, and we need to put those in place right now. I can tell you that Travis County has done a whole list of things right now to protect our voter registration database. And I'm not going to tell you what those things are. But they've paid for it too. We have paid for it. We got no help from anybody. So that's, most unfortunate. And what this report says is, not only do we need money for voting systems and voter registration protection, but we also have to figure out how we're going to deal with our newest enemy, and that's this social engineering. We're Americans. We take each other at face value. We're used to telling the truth, and that's it. So we are completely unprepared for this social engineering attack that's happening to us, and we don't know what to do about it, and we're going to have to figure it out, because that's where the damage is being done. It isn't to the databases, and it isn't to the systems. It's the misinformation and the trickery of us being caught with. In our culture, we don't have a way to deal with this, and we're not that suspicious. We tend to, go with one another, and because that's what our culture is, never tell a lie, all that kind of stuff. We got to figure that one out. Okay, now I want to come back to you in just a second, but I want to finish the schools. Okay. Okay. Well, elections started out with the premise that voting places would be held in public structures. And the most public structures guaranteed are schools, and the most schools are elementary schools. So we've got a 50-year pattern here that we're suddenly, called to, rethink, abandon, so it is complicated. I have already tried my best to get out of every elementary school I can find. Just get out of them. Just because it's easier on the parents, it's easier on the election judges, it's just easier on everybody if I can find some other place to go. The problem is, there are not that many public buildings, that are not schools, that are not, And if you're in a wealthy part of town, well, you might have lots of buildings to choose from. And if you're in a part of town that's economically depressed and there hasn't been a lot of infrastructure investment, there are no buildings. You have to use the schools. So it is a tough situation. One of the things that I wish the legislature would do is, as part of additional funding for elections, is pay for a security guard at all those elementary schools for voters who are coming in and going out, a single door. It should be a single access, a single door. And if we were to do something like that, I think it would get us over this this place of, well, what are we going to, how are we going to get past this? We have no other structures, and yet we've got people worried about, voters coming into the school. So what are we going to do about that? Stay tuned. It's a problem. Okay, yes, sir.
The reason for my question is if something is offline and you want to interfere with it, you usually have to be physically present. If it's online, somebody can interfere remotely. How much of your stuff is offline?
All the voting is offline. All the voter registration is online. So here's what I'm really worried about, because you bring up an important point. You don't have to be a PhD with some kind of really expensive hacking, setup and go through some extreme, attempt to take down an election. No. You don't have to do any of that at all. You can spend 25 cents and, launch what's called a distributed denial of service. So what that means is you got some little robot that's going to attack, and I don't mean to say that this could happen now, because now we've put in place stuff to prevent this, right? So nothing's perfect, but we're on to this one. That what happens is that when you go to vote, especially on election day, and you're qualified through the voter registration system, right? It's connected. So if we want to process voters, we need to keep that voter registration system up and alive. Well, what if you had a robot that suddenly attacked voter registration back at the main office, and it did just a takedown, So it's like, all right. So what we do is we turn it off, we reboot it, it comes back up, line moves on. That's not so bad, except if they do it to you every 5 minutes all day long. Yeah. That is scary. And you don't, and it's not remote, it's not anything. It's a thing. It's a silly way to absolutely stop voting. And it doesn't have anything to do with paper trails. It doesn't have anything to do with even really the voter registration rolls. They haven't gone in and changed any names or done anything like that. All they've done is interrupt enough to create a line that then is a problem. Now, the other solution, besides you keep bringing it back up and hope you can continue, is we have backup copies of the rolls, so we can continue processing voters to vote, but we lose the security of no double voting, so it has its cost to it. We can still vote voters under a provisional ballot, but provisional ballots take about 20 minutes a person. So, these are critical issues that I have spent the last, 6 months just completely freaking out over. And I have to say that we've done a lot to protect ourselves from this kind of thing. So we're, not promising 100%, but Travis County does a really, really good job of supporting elections. Okay, I thought I had. Okay, Patty, you want to go ahead?
Okay. I want to commend you, because I know what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And how hard you, your staff, and all the people who are support staff, even on election day.
Thanks.
How much time and effort goes into it.
Thanks. I love elections. It's like I'm a junkie.
For people in this neighborhood who may not know, with Doss Elementary School being torn down imminently, it's likely that this will become a polling place in our neighborhood. My main question has to do with the system that you're putting in place, which I'm really excited about. Are there other entities that are going to be using this, or is this just we're at the top of the pyramid, and once we've done it, everybody else is going to want to copy it?
Yes and yes. Yes, we're at the top of the pyramid. We're one of the first, but we're not alone. And yes, this is going to go like hotcakes because the Russians changed the picture. And I can go into the story about why there was so much delay and resistance to paper in the marketplace and all that kind of stuff. But we're finally past that, thank goodness. And now that we have a system that's legal to purchase, and you can actually, get it and do, and then make use of the paper trail. Now we've got something we can work with for the future. Bruce Sherbert is, I think he's Collin County. He's the elections administrator up in Collin County. I hope I have the correct county. They're very close to doing the exact same thing we're doing. They're pretty much tracking along with us. So I
Is it the
think.
same system or a different?
No, that's what I'm saying. Same system as us, same issues, same concerns. We're probably going to be inventing the risk limiting audit procedures to give to them, and then they'll probably work on some stuff that we can use. So there's some collaboration yet to happen. And remember, we just got this voted on a couple weeks ago, so it's all shiny and new right now. We don't have all the answers. So yes, and then this particular company has sold this system in other states. 40, I think it's 43 or 45 other states have something similar to this. The paper edition has been certified to add on to what was already in place throughout the United States. So there's people who already have this system and people are voting on it, but to add the paper trail is the next upgrade for several of these other states and counties, because some states do a statewide system for voting, and everybody, in the whole state uses one system. And then some states are like Texas, which has individual county determination. Okay, I saw another hand. Yes, sir.
So the software then, on this same point, is off the shelf, but you can customize it?
Okay, so depending on which piece you're talking about. Okay, the actual ballot definition and voter interface is back to that proprietary software. Okay, it's the same old story. One of the things we did not get, from StarVote, or that StarVote did not end up making its way through, is open source. Now, the exception to that is for risk limiting audits, that software will be open source, and the companies will be required to tie into that. So at least the auditing for the paper artifact after, at the end of the election will be on open source. And other people will be able to look at that, they'll be able to review it, and we will go through a modified public contribution part of open source to add to that open source software over time. Remember that when you talk about open source, there's the concept of that anybody can add to it, or anybody can make criticisms or suggestions to it. Well, elections is highly regulated and highly controlled, so it's not going to be wide open like that. But we will have the opportunity to have, responsible people say, okay, here's the next piece of what you need to improve about this risk limiting audit software.
So is there, on that same point, is there a single vendor or multiple vendors selling?
Multiple, because you'll have the ES&S people are going to be handling the voting part of the software, the voting and tabulation. Okay. The auditing, the risk limiting audit portion is going to be handled by an open source software that has to be connected with the ES&S vendor, so that's a shared relationship. Voter registration is a different vendor, and it has to be connected to the voting system, especially the voter interface part. Okay. And then there's one other thing. Here's one other point I wanted to make about that. Darn it. There's one more piece of this. I'm sorry, and I'll remember it probably and get back to you. So the answer is it's a mix of different things, and there's a lot of moving parts, which is why it's sometimes hard to give one definitive answer. It's like I always want to say, yes, no, maybe. So, and I also don't have all the answers right now. We haven't gone through implementation. There's some stuff I'm still trying to figure out, because on the front end, I have to figure out how we're going to actually label and barcode and scan these ballots so that they're set up for being able to do a risk limiting audit after the fact. And that all has to be thought through. It was about 6 weeks ago, I went up to Colorado to see their risk limiting audit. And it was one of those, I thought my brain was going to explode. It was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. But there's a lot of details in exactly how you connect that front end with the back end. And if you don't start at the front end, people who do computers understand this. You don't start at the front end, then you're ill prepared when you get to the back end. And one of the things about risk limiting audits that we want for the future is we want other elections administrators to like it. We want it to be easy. We want it to be inexpensive so that other counties do this. So it needs to be carefully planned all the way through so that it's just a seamless process. Okay. Okay, right here, and then we'll go back.
So, a lot of people, military, for example, might be deployed somewhere, but their home of record is in Travis County. But there's people that live on reservations and Indian reservations, which is a never counted, never vote group, and they're entitled to vote, and their vote makes a difference in terms of the resources they get. They may have a home of record in Travis County. So in the paper votes or the ballots, is anybody looking at a way for these people to vote electronically without the paper? Because you know, if you're a group guy and you're in Ukraine, okay, and you have to mail in a paper ballot to have it read by the machine and all that kind of stuff. Who knows? That's dependent on their mail system.
Right. Okay, so it's an excellent question and one I get asked a lot.
Could you paraphrase it? I'm not sure all
Okay.
heard it.
Well, the question is, what are we going to do about folks who are way out in the field for a variety of reasons, and they may have even been underserved communities for a long time? How are we going to get a ballot to them in a way that's quick and efficient, and so they can participate in the process?
So you don't
and one of the solutions is electronically send it and have it come back. And can we make that kind of thing work?
Because you always hear in an election, well, okay, there's a 0.5% of vote between two candidates.
Yeah.
And everybody's always talking about, well, we've got to wait another 2 weeks to count the mail-in ballots.
It's not quite that long, but I understand what your point.
But,
You got to wait several days.
That's what you always hear the TV announcers saying.
Yeah.
So you have that problem there of getting a paper ballot.
Yeah.
And actually, in fact, because we have people going around and taking mail-in ballots out of people's mailboxes.
Yes.
So we have that problem with the security of the mail-in ballot as well.
And there are whole states that do nothing but by mail voting.
Exactly, Oregon.
Okay, so so I mentioned to you paper trail and risk limiting audits. The number 3 most important recommendation that came out of this committee was absolutely no voted ballots over the internet. Here's why. There are things that we can do to help, especially military. It is perfectly reasonable, and we do this today, where we can, and we could even make both federal and state laws that are even a little more friendly in this process. It's okay to send a blank, neighborhood ballot, your ballot, to somebody who's in some forward post, wherever, and it could be UN, it can be, armed services, it could be consultant, it can be really anybody. And oftentimes the difficult and time-consuming part of getting a ballot is, contacting the county clerk, the local county clerk where you have to get it, and then getting it all the way out to wherever they are. That's the time-consuming part. Well, we can address that by sending them an electronic copy of their unmarked ballot, send it to them, and then they can find a way to print it out. Then they hand mark it, just like regular by-mail ballots, they hand mark it, put it in whatever their mail service is, military, pouch, contractor, whatever it is, and have it make it's the second half, but it's the short half of the trip to come back then to the county clerk. What we do not have the capability to do right now is to protect anybody's voted ballot from being interfered with when it comes across any kind of transmission line. Telephone, internet, satellite, anything, we're not there. And, I've got lots of millennials will say, well, I just want to vote on my phone. And it was like, well, sweetie, you won't get your vote. Your phone will lose that vote before it ever gets to me. And until we solve that problem, we're going to have this half assistance, which is a good thing, and that's going to be helpful, but not voted ballots. Absolutely not. Okay, so yes, ma'am.
Related to this topic, we're in the process of
looking into mail-in ballots, overseas ballots,
Yes.
because we're going to be away during the election period, early voting and
Okay.
November. And it turns out you can get a blank ballot by email. That is an option currently.
There you go.
But my concern is that if I am somewhere where I do not have access to snail mail easily, or if I'm not in a country where the mail delivery is reliable, there's a 5-day post-election, November election date deadline. There's a huge risk that my ballot won't get here on time, even if it does get here
Yes, ma'am.
eventually. Is there, and then I also checked into the consulates are not currently set up to accept. So if I could mail it to the U.S. consulate or embassy in that country, it would expedite the process, and they could scan it in and figure out a way to get it.
Well,
to
I
you.
can't
Or-
scan it, but
well, they could create the electronic version or whatever. You know, that I would leave to the experts. But it seems to me that that would be a logical step to make that process a little more accessible.
I agree with you to take the more established mail routes and have everybody funnel into those.
Right.
I think that's kind of an obvious next step, and a lot of them already do it. The contractors are already doing that kind of thing, and the UN does it that way. But it's all the nonprofits, and the military just has such a huge weight on it to try to do this. And and let's face it, when they're out there in the field, they're probably thinking about other things first. Voting comes later. So I think we just have to give a little bit more thought to it. But there's not going to be any electronic return.
Right.
Yeah, at least I don't see it in the foreseeable future. As long as it can be hijacked.
Sure.
So, but I agree with you. There's got to. In fact, I have a similar story where I had and really in the old days, I had a ballot chase me around South Africa as I got redeployed hotel to hotel to hotel. Never did get my by-mail ballot. Managed to get a flight home that was like about 2 hours before the polls closed, and went from the airport here because I didn't think I was going to be home in time to be able to vote, and I did. I came home in time to vote. Otherwise, I would have missed the election.
The only other thing I would say is that we've discovered that how difficult it is, not transparent, how difficult it is to apply for a mail-in ballot unless you're over 65, let's say.
Yeah, I know.
The instructions are vague, and I've had to call into the elections office and talk to a very helpful person, but not everyone picks up the phone, and it shouldn't be that hard.
It's archaic. It's ancient. The procedures are not that friendly. I don't like it by mail at all. I just don't know of any other system that helps. And it's not like we can invent our own procedures. We have to follow state law. Right. And now, especially with the military, we have to follow federal law too. So our hands are a little tied, but we try to. I sympathize. I don't think it's very friendly either.
So you always end up getting a paper ballot that's relevant to the particular district that you're in with the names of candidates for that district.
Your address.
For wherever your address is. Okay.
There's several people who haven't asked the question yet.
Okay, sir.
So on this new system, you mentioned that Travis County is supposed to use it. How reliable or how well has it been tested? And the second thing was that you mentioned was that multiple vendors. How sure are we that one of these vendors are not tied to the Russians?
I don't trust them either. We do not trust the vendors at all. No, it's a fair question. Well, okay, so first question. How do we know how reliable this system is? Well, it's been in use, just the marking part of it and the tallying part of it has already been in use for several years. So we've got that history already there throughout lots of places in the United States and Texas. So we've got that. The paper trail part of it is an upgrade, is an addition that's brand new, and it's just come through. In order to qualify to be sold in the state of Texas, any voting system, you have to go through federal certification and state certification. And what those two certifications include is Vista Labs, which is a lab that does really kind of more hardware testing. They're going to do the sort of the old joke is the throw it against the wall test. They're going to bang it multiple times, and they're going to do heat stress and cold stress, and all of those like crash dummy kind of things that you see. All of those lab kinds of tests are going to be done on all the hardware part of it, and anything that has moving parts that's going to be part of any part of from voter interface to tabulation. Then, when it comes back to the Elections Assistance Commission, which is the federal agency that's responsible for certifying voting equipment, then it's going to go through software analysis that is based on standards that are established by the Elections Assistance Commission. I've had the honor to serve on the standards board for 10 years, maybe longer. And we've just done new standards as of last year that focus on the component part of it. In other words, when we're looking at how a system behaves, we want to focus on the voter interface part of it and qualify that. And then we want to move on to the tabulation part and qualify that. So it's on a component basis, so that then we do have the possibility for the future that if we had companies that wanted to partner, we could use one's voting interface part and the other one's tabulation part, and you wouldn't have to go through a very expensive and very lengthy certification process to bring both of those pieces together and put them in the marketplace, which only adds to the expense of these pieces of equipment. Then, after you've gone through that whole federal certification, and it's lengthy, it's millions of dollars, it's not easy, then you come to the state of Texas. And the state of Texas also does its own program, and it doesn't really pay much attention to the physical hardware part of it. It focuses on the software. And the idea and there's usually at least 3 commissioners that, it used to be 2 times a year. I think they're trying to add a 3rd one, especially now that we think we're maybe going to get more paper trail opportunities to consider for the future. 3 commissioners, and they go through and they look at every possible software function that the system can do. So can you undervote, which is allowable? Can you overvote? No, not allowed. Can you mark more than one candidate? Only under certain nested if circumstances. Can you cast a blank ballot? Yes, but you got to tell it several times, I really do mean to do this. All of those permutations and combinations of ways people might choose to mark their ballot. Every single little thing that somebody might do as you step through every race and every candidate and every bond choice, everything, they go through and they check off to make sure that the systems performed those and then gave correct answers, because they're going to run a test deck of known data through it, and then so they have something to compare it against when they come back to test it. They know what's correct and what they put in, and they can compare the two. So both federal and state, and I still think we don't trust the vendors. Because what's important, and I really do think that it's another sort of good thing about Travis County, is that we are rapidly, in the past, and certainly we will get into this position again very quickly, we want to be vendor independent. We do our own ballot programming. It is not shipped off to the vendor for them to do it and then it comes back to us. We do our own logic and accuracy testing. So they don't build our test deck and then send it to us and we run the equipment against that. No, we build everything ourselves. So we know, that we have limited the outside exposure to the extent possible, which still puts us in the position of looking at some other risks, but at least we're not dependent upon a vendor and their private sector, board of directors preferences. They just simply don't affect how we operate our election. And that's really what we want. So as quickly as we can get implementation up and running and get it in place and learn everything we can about this system, we will again be vendor independent, and that's the best way to do it. It's never a perfect world. Okay, yes, ma'am?
Okay, yeah, I actually had a quick question for you. It's going back to disability, but it's been a long time since I've done a clerk. It was 8 years. But I know some people are insistent on having somebody do it for them. Like,
Yeah.
So how are you going to deal with the problem like that?
No problem at all. They can have anybody they want. They can have,
Okay.
in fact, if you're a voter and you want to have assistance, you can have a child, you can have.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's not going to change.
No,
anything like that.
no, that's, nothing changes for that.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Yes, sir.
You haven't talked about voter fraud as yet. I mean, we hear some claims that there's voter fraud going on. We hear of studies that claim that there is no voter fraud or it's very minimal. It doesn't really influence, affect the outcome of the elections. In bringing into online this new system that you're talking about, it seems like it creates a window for people who claim there's voter fraud to say, there's a weakness in this. It hasn't been verified. It hasn't been proven. Can you?
No, I would think. Okay, well let's.
It's a hypothetical question.
Okay, the fact that it's not connected to the internet and its paper trail puts it in a stronger position for not being criticized than before when we had paperless DREs. So I would say that it's just the opposite of what you're saying. We now, when we get this new system, we will be better insured and better protected from, especially scurrilous, accusations that, it could do this or whatever, that will all just go away. Now, the thing about fraud, though, I've been doing this for 31 years. It depends on, and I have...
Before she was born.
I don't know where the fraud is. I haven't seen it. Would somebody please point it out to me? It's just, it's not there. I see suppression of voters. I see gerrymandering, and that is certainly fraud. But I haven't seen individuals go about, trying to vote twice, unless, and there have been some very tiny, extreme, minor circumstances where, Grandpa forgot, and we weren't able to stop him because most of the time we can prevent somebody from voting twice. I've seen some real extreme situations that are not about fraud. They're about, human beings making a mistake, and they're like on a single hand. There is no fraud.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody shows up to the polling place, and they have to be in the database. In the old days, we had a poll book because we had to vote in our own precinct. What they're talking about is trying to create the fear that someone who is not an American citizen showing up to a polling place and having worked for a number of years as a poll worker, no one in their right mind is going to show up who is not an American citizen and jeopardize being outed. It's
pretty fantastical.
It is an almost absolute rare. I mean, you'd have to be totally out of your mind to show up at a polling place like that.
I am an election judge.
Yay! Give her a hand, y'all. She's doing a great job.
I will tell you that when somebody comes from another country and they don't know how our election system works, they say, it's election day, and they show up at the polls.
I agree with that.
Right? It's my responsibility as an election judge to be sure that they are a registered voter. And they, it ends up being a learning experience because they honestly don't know that they're not eligible to vote. Right? So we take them aside and we describe the system. I
will say that happened to me once. But the voter fraud that people are talking about in this state and many times in this country is to increase the fear that there are many, many Hispanics coming across the southern border and they're fraudulently voting. And that is
there's one other case.
But thank you for asking, because at least we get the chance to say, come on.
There is one other case that you've described in the past, and unfortunately because of the voter ID bill, more people are voting by mail. And it is the vote by mail where if fraud is going to occur, that's where it will occur. So if I am living in a nursing home and I'm over 65 and I get my you know, I register to get my ballot, I get my ballot, and some lovely person comes in and says, oh, I'll just, you know, we'll all just meet in the cafeteria and the living unit, and we'll just all sit down and fill out ballots together. And then I'll take them and I'll bring them in. That's voter fraud.
Right.
Exactly. And that's what happens.
And it sounds so innocent to them, you know. And it's also with regular families too. It's called the undue influence at the kitchen table.
Which just happens.
Yes, ma'am, and then we'll come back.
I want to go back to the study that you talked about and the book you talked about. I have basically two questions. Who is in the committee? Is it multi-state, bipartisan, whatever? And who generated the study?
Okay. Very quickly, it's published by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. Cool. It was a good group. It was done out of Columbia University in New York. We came from all different places. The president of Columbia, Lee Bollinger, and then the president of Indiana University, Michael McRobbie, were our chairs. And then the folks who were on this were, Professor of Computer Science from Princeton, Josh Benelow, who was on the StarVote committee with me, who was on my StarVote group, is a cryptographer with Microsoft. We've got Moon Duchin, who does gerrymandering work. She's figured out a mathematical way to measure to know if you're just, on the edge, or are you full bore, illegal gerrymandering. She's done some fabulous work in that area. Juan Gilbert, who's done some work with open source voting systems, is a professor of computer and information science at the University of Florida. Neil Kelly is, like me, an actual election official who conducts elections, and he does Orange County in California. Kevin Kennedy, he's retired now, but he ran the Wisconsin Government Accountability Board for their Secretary of State. Ron Rivest, and that's an incredibly famous name, and people who are in computer science know who the name is. Yeah, it is. He was there, and Ron Rivest was also on my StarVote committee, so boy, do I have bragging rights. Charles Stewart, the professor from MIT. And then we had other people who were supportive too. There were staff people that came from, science, technology, and law out of NASM. So we had in-house experts who helped us with the writing of it. And then there was a whole committee of people who were our writers and checkers, fact checkers, and challengers.
So the government was not really behind it?
No, this was more or less a private. It was more of an academic, convocation of practitioners and computer experts and academicians.
And they didn't have any input. I mean, they didn't care, or
government?
Did they support?
Oh no, this I assure you, this report is hot. Congress is definitely. We did the big. Press release and answer questions and all that about it day before yesterday in D.C.
So they're supportive.
Oh yeah. Well, I wouldn't call it supportive. Let's not go too far. But they have what this report will do is it will force them to look at what the research and the facts say. And here are the things you can do. Here are the things that are ill-advised. And that list of 41 things that need to be done right away.
And what about money, though? I mean,
yep, that's in there too.
Push them.
Yes. Yeah, it's all in there.
Yes, sir. Thank you for doing it.
So
yeah, you're welcome.
To continue this question, how much strong teeth will have this to be implemented, accepted? Does it have to go to congressional or state? How would be that process? And then can you name some of the states that have one system or through?
Let's see, North Carolina, Georgia, Colorado, Oregon. There's actually quite a few that are statewide systems. Those are some examples. I think Pennsylvania is statewide too. that I can think of right off the top of my head. Okay, so in terms of Congress, though, just to be clear about it, Congress has, everybody has told them this, so it's no news to them. They have dragged their feet, done nothing, and have behaved badly when it comes to doing something about elections, and they know it. And I suppose there are reasons that they could offer to us for that circumstance, but nevertheless, that's where we are. The idea behind this report having so much weight in Congress right now is that we have gone through a sea change. Yep. Everything changed once the Russians attacked us.
Yep.
Everything, all bets were off. And the things that we were worried about were not the things that we really should have been worried about, and the things that did happen have now redirected our focus so that we can pay attention to the real vulnerabilities. So we have gone through, in 12 months, a huge reawakening of what we need for elections, and this report has very much documented that sea change. So it's the only place so far where a very well-researched and very well-documented set of recommendations has come through based on findings that say this happened and this happened and this happened, and therefore based on all the collaboration of all these researchers and incredibly fine minds, it was rare air to be included in, that they say here's the way we address each one of these particular vulnerabilities now that we've reconsidered what's more possible to happen and what's less possible to happen.
Okay. So I have a question.
Okay.
A suggestion, actually. So because I'm an election judge, and I happen to be an election judge in an elementary school where we did have a police officer, and he was sort of bored all day long.
Yeah.
That's all right. But we don't have it. I, as an election judge, during my training, have no information to provide people who are standing in line or people who have voted to say, if you have friends who have not yet voted, these are the voting places that are available. So maybe during the training of election workers, we should be able to provide access to that information at the election.
Okay. I thought we were covering red, yellow, green in training sessions.
We know that we're doing it because
everybody's y'all come up with great ideas in the field.
Because we don't have any way of processing a voter until we put in the number of people who are in line, right?
Yes.
You keep doing this, and all of a sudden you're not able to process a voter, and you say, why is this not working? And you see, because there's this little window that says how many people are in line, and you can't do anything until you put in the number. And it goes to a central location. But we now have iPads at the polling places, so the iPad could be programmed to be able to pull up, because it's helpful for me as a judge.
Absolutely. I guess I need to go back and check some of my assumptions because I'm under the impression that we were teaching you about red, yellow, green, and you can go into red, yellow, green and look up where all the locations are. So, but maybe that needs more work. There's also
could be it's not in the guide that we all have.
Yes, it should be. I'll go back and double check it. Okay, and thank you for telling me. The other thing is that while we want to be really careful about, because you can't have a phone in the polling place, you can't have, so you have to be careful about telling people, how to look stuff up or what to do. And if you offer a piece of paper, sometimes it can walk off.
Right.
So you have to, there's some certain things that are it's against what you would say would be the best way to do things because you've got other laws that are holding you. But the idea is, if we could give people the idea. One of the things that we do absolutely in some of the heavier trafficked vote centers is we have what we call is the other top 10. And so what we have is if you're in one of those hot top 10 voting locations and you're standing in a long line, we have at the judges' desks, and I think it's on that big tall podium thing, that tall banner thing, the other 10 places that are very close around that you could go to get out of line.
So our
So-
polling place is close to Randall's, but I don't want you to send me.
We
never have a line.
Oh, come on. Yes, sir.
I'm an election judge in the Lakeway area, and what we've done is the election judges have called ahead of time each other and know who's where at which precinct. And then if some precinct gets overruled, particularly Randall's, they will call around with other individual precinct places what does it look like there. And they will actually send people from Randall's to one of our other things which has no line.
Yeah, there you go, absolutely. Thank you for doing that.
You have to use a cell phone to do that.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Is there a way for that process to be available to people before we head out? So you don't have to redirect me when I get to Randall's, but I can.
Red, yellow, green?
Yeah. Yeah, and one way you can do it is to put it in the League of Women Voters voter guide.
Absolutely.
Be another place.
Excellent thought.
But I mean, if
Yes,
your
sir.
system is available.
Before I set out to the poll, I checked the
people
web
don't know
to make sure I had the
anymore.
address right, and
Yeah.
it gave me the estimated wait time, and it also listed a bunch of other polling
Yeah.
places so if that's not coming from you, where's that coming from?
No, it is coming from me.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm talking about, red, yellow, green. We call it red, yellow, green. Yeah, that is it.
All right.
But it's not well enough known
I agree.
by people who are voting that they have access to that information.
Tell everybody about red, yellow, green.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So with all of these wonderful initiatives that you have, and us living in one of the most progressive counties in Texas, and that has resources to hire competent professionals like you, and by the way, all of your work that you've described today is absolutely wonderful. But so my question then is, what about some of these other counties that don't have these resources, that don't have that progressive, forward-looking outlook? Or do you have concerns, specifically in the state of Texas, but more generally, about these other county, insofar as the county's responsible for all this, right?
Yep.
Okay. Can you speak about how you see that landscape here in Texas with these other?
Right. Yes, I'm in frequent conversations with my brothers and sisters in the counties around, all around Texas, to all 253 of the other counties. Well, I alluded to it a minute ago when I was talking about risk limiting audits, when I said we want to make sure that as we develop the procedures and we think through this beginning and connected to the end process, so that it's really, really easy, so that they will want to do it and it won't be expensive for them to do. That's the way you get other counties to adopt best practices, is you have to show them how. Don't just assume that they're gonna have the resources to do this on their own, because they don't. So part of what counties like Collin and like Travis and some of the other counties automatically take on when we do these new kinds of projects is we presume that we will be the source for the written procedures and the best practices and the advice for anybody else who comes after us, for how to do, depends on what. How do you tell people where to go for different lines? How do you tell people how to protect their voter registration from getting, a denial of service attack on election day? How do you tell them how to train for their voter interface? Certainly how do you do risk limiting audits? All of those pieces are up to those of us who do have resources to document and pull together in the very best way we can. And it's all about teaching standards and trying to reach people the best way possible. And then make them fully available, share it, absolutely freely with as many people as possible, even so much as to going to other counties and assisting them in implementing it. That's the way that kind of thing gets done. It's not going to be through funding in their local county, and it's not going to be through the expectation that their political process, even if they have an appointed EA, that their political process is going to deliver to them the kinds of resources that we have here, or that the big counties have, with universities, close by and all of that. It comes from us. So just buying a new voting system is just this part of my job. The rest of the job is getting it implemented here and then documenting it in such a way so that it can be taught elsewhere. Let's go back to
So the only reason I would suggest staying in schools as an election judge, I have kids on their way to gym or playing outside. They come by and they say, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And so we have a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And so we'll have them come in and we, even if we're busy, we explain the process to them. And that's,
I love that. I just really love that.
Well, and
Yes, ma'am.
parents and teachers can stop in at their leisure. I mean, I know that when I've worked at Dawson, that's mine, that the principal, will make a point even to come. Two questions. One has to do with the report. Are you or your cohorts actively pursuing educating the Congress critters within the area that you have jurisdiction over? That's the first thing. And the second is, I get texts on my phone literally every day from someplace where I have shopped. Don't you want to come in? We've got a coupon kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, with almost everybody in this county having a cell phone of some sort, and the ability that we already have email and text and phone numbers for people, and we have the ability to delete people off of the roll once they have voted, so that we know they voted. What if there was a system to start texting people early in the voting process to say, hey, today is the first day of voting, come vote, and once they have done that, you don't nudge them anymore.
Right. We try to do that, and that's partly what Red, Yellow, Green is all about, is to try to tell them.
On their cell phone?
Here's election day. Yeah, it is absolutely a cell phone app or a computer app. Both.
I'm not on that.
Yeah. So, and the only other thing I would say about that is we try to do as much as we can think of with social media.
Yeah.
My only caution about social media is I don't. It's not my job to generate turnout. And I know that sounds weird, but it's not. Because unless I can absolutely guarantee 100% of the time that I am equally and fairly generating turnout, amongst all the groups fairly, across the whole county, then it's not appropriate for government to be involved in that process that might skew efforts towards one group or another, even if it's unintentional. So we have to be cautious that whatever we do on social media really has the broadest reach possible. There's no niche stuff for us we that's risky business for us. So, so things to consider that's like, well, why don't you just do this or why don't you just do that? And it's like, well, they sound like really great ideas, but then there's 5,500 other great ideas, and I've quickly run out of staff and money to do all the little teeny niches. So that's why sometimes a great idea, is not something we can really pursue because of the fairness angle that it has to be applied to everybody. So, yes, ma'am.
I have a question, a clarification, request on mail-in ballots, because I've heard, as you were talking about, when you count them, and then I've heard everything from, well, they don't even count them unless it's a close race.
Oh, for crying out loud. Okay. No, they do get counted. Well, they're tracked too. So if a voter sends in their application, that gets marked into a database, and then there's another addition to the database that says the date and time that got sent back out. And then if the voter made any additional contacts with the office, that's logged in the database, and then the day that the voted ballot turned back up or never did, that's all tracked. And then if there's something wrong with the application, they forgot to sign across the flap, something like that, it has to be rejected and sent back to them, that's tracked. And then when they corrected it and sent it back in, that's tracked. So ballot by mail has oodles of oversight. Much more so than regular voted ballots. Then there's a whole group of people. We can be from anywhere from about 30 individuals to about 100 individuals that work what's called ballot board. And ballot board is a group of folks who do the sorting and the preparation of all that folded up envelope stuff that protects secrecy, so that we can get them all prepared to be run through the scanners and tabulated. And if, we could have anywhere from 10,000 to 60,000 by-mail ballots in a normal election, so it's a big job. It's not a little thing, and it's getting bigger, by the way, because we're all turning 65, and it's an aging group, growing aging group. So what happens is that the ballot board will, at some point, a little deeper into, about halfway through early voting, we'll start preparing the ballots that we have received. And it's a process where they're separated. You're going to log in who came in, make sure it gets in the system, and then you're going to separate them. So then they're going to be mixed up, so you don't know which one came with which. And then you're going to open up the pink envelope so that you can spread out the voted ballot. And then they're going to have their little creases back folded so it'll go through a scanner. All of that has to be done, and then it stops, and nothing happens until election night. So we keep piling on the preparation. We get all of our, all of our ducks in a row, get everything taken care of. And then on election night, after the polls close at 7 p.m., we take the ballots that we have already received in-house, because there are going to be some coming later, the ones we already have, and they're counted at the same time on election night as all the other ballots. And so the ballot by mail is included in the early voting totals, so that first number that you get on election night is early voting totals, and it includes ballot by mail.
Does that include international too? Because
it depends on which country, and it depends on what their counting procedure is. I don't think I could give you a definite yes or no.
Like when I was overseas for 11 years, I even spent 50 francs to get it sent DHL.
Yeah.
And yet, but I didn't know exactly how it was being processed.
Yeah. Well, that's how it happens. It comes in and it gets prepped, but nothing's done. You don't know any results, but it's all prepped and ready to go, so that when you're there on election night, you zip it through the scanners, produce the results, and distribute.
I think one thing that might be confusing the issue is the issue of knowing how many mail-in ballots there are left to count. Will it make a difference? And the answer often to that is no, but they're counted anyway.
Yeah.
And they're part of the count. But elections can say who the winner of that particular election is based on the numbers.
The county also allowed me to build up the way that the elections department is laid out, a room so that people can watch all that stuff we do. So you're welcome to come down on election night. It used to be quite the hoopla and the place to be. Now it's incredibly quiet. Since we have electronic voting, it's so fast, there's not that big a show. But you're certainly welcome to come down and watch everything that's being done. That's why I put that big glass there so you can see everything that's happening. Yes, sir, and then you.
So, I want to bring up the security issue.
Okay.
And where I'm coming from was NASA, and having to create a way to communicate that was secure between 80 different installations and things like that. If you have a dozen different units taking your software, particularly your software, but hardware and software both, and you have a whole bunch of different sellers using that same software.
Sellers?
Yeah, vendors, whatever you want to call them, vendors.
Okay.
Vendors of that software.
Okay.
Now you have a problem. For example, in certain kinds of air platforms, virtually all of that stuff and all the electronics involved with it goes through Northrop Grumman or goes through Raytheon, for example. So you have a very limited set of vendors who are doing this work, and they're known and well established, and they have very good security systems for all their employees and their developers. If you have a large number of vendors for the software that takes care of voting and its accuracy and its security, it seems to me that just having a large number of vendors is a security problem in and of itself.
Mhm.
And it was, I'm just curious
Sure,
if there
yeah.
was any
Well, it might
discussion in
Yeah.
this group about that.
The marketplace is, for election vendors, is very closed and very small. It's very difficult to break into this market. It's highly regulated and it's highly specific and it's got a lot of weight on it. It's a very emotional business. There were really only, there's the top three. There's Hart, ES&S, and Dominion. And then there's a couple of others. But so this market is like almost you could count them on one hand. It's a very small marketplace.
And so they've got a lot of experience dealing with security of their developers.
Oh, very publicly and a lot of like yelling and it's very emotional and you know you have to and it's gone on for the whole 30 years I've been involved in it. So, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
my question for you is, actually, first I want to make a statement. I've been waiting, been involved since 1994 with this. So thank you so much for finally doing the paper ballots.
Yes, I tried. I would have done it sooner.
And but my question for you is, like, as working as a clerk, I saw a lot about the provisional. So is it the goal eventually to get away from the provisional?
No, that's federal law. So, and it's always well, it's supposed to be the fail-safe that if there's anything wrong anywhere, no matter whose fault it is, that you always get the chance to vote, and then we figure it out later. You know what happened again.
Well, I just heard so many people say when they were lying, you know, when I was doing my clerk thing, it's not getting counted. You'd be surprised at how many people say that about the provisional. So that's why I want to know if this is going to help it at all.
And the statistics bear that out. It's not, you know. It's partly because it's an obstacle for voters to get over. You have to come back down to the voter registration office. You have to bring whatever documentation or answer that's going to cure your particular problem. So, and that's, you know, for people who are trying to work and take care of kids and do all that kind of stuff, that's an imposition to try to do that. And you only have, I can't remember, it's only a certain number of days. I think it's 7 days, but it might be 5. It's 5 days. 5 days. To do that. So it's a pretty tall order to get through.
Which is why we discourage it on
well, you know, but still, there are people who are mistreated, and there's a mistake that's been made, and they get to save their vote because we offer them a provisional. But the statistics are not good about who actually gets through that process.
But the person who walked to the polling place and forgot their
ID.
Right?
Yeah.
We can let them vote provisionally, but we usually say
and you're going to have to go back down to VR and show them your ID for it to count.
Go home. We'll process
or just
would you all help me thank